Tonight, on a very special episode of Alley.
Hey, what is going on? These plates aren't gonna grow legs and walk into the kitchen by themselves.
Kiss my grits.
Sick of you broads putting down my food.
Hell, putting it down's easy. The trick is keeping it down.
It's trouble at the Moot as Allie and Nora are confronted with workplace harassment.
Keep it up, girls. Keep it up. You're gonna get one from column A and one from column B.
Allie, tonight, right after an all-new Everyone Loves Tookie, 8:30, 7:30 Central on MCTV.
Just passing through, but if things work out, she's gonna stay. Oh, why? Fun, 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 fun.
Hey everyone, you got Mind Circus here with another open world story solo build for Mind Over Meta, and today we're going to be looking at Power Rev. But before we get started, instead of my usual shill for updates and subscribes, the first thing I want to do is give a shout out to Aldel for his work on the voiceover for the intro that you may have just heard. You've probably heard his voice on a few of my other intros, and as always, he just completely knocked it out of the park. Just amazing work he does bringing my cornball ideas to life, and I surely appreciate him for it. Not only is he super talented, he's just also one of the favorite all-time people of mine to just play this game with. He's a fantastic individual. The other thing I want to do is direct your attention to another YouTube channel with a bit of a ramble that will eventually come back to our topic at hand, I promise. But as usual, you know what? Timestamps are in the description, so if you don't want to sit through this, by all means, just click away to the parts that you do care about. I get it, I really do. No offense taken. That's why the timestamps are there, so feel free. So one thing that may not be super clear from my videos is the thing that actually truly pulled me into this game and the franchise in the first place. And that's always been the lore and the world building. And while I'm pretty critical of the game's actual story, and especially its execution, and while I feel that the story in this game really does lag behind two other MMOs, those being Star Wars: The Old Republic and The Secret World, the actual lore and world building in this game has always been my favorite part of it. No other MMO has ever really matched that for me. It sucked me in, and it kept me here. But you know, 12 world completes later, 8 runs through the complete core story, 5 complete runs through Path of Fire's story, etc., etc. And one tends to lose sight of these things. It becomes less about an adventure and the characters you make in your head, and more about the mechanics, which is fortunately another thing that I feel Guild Wars 2 does exceptionally well. But if you ask me what I love most about Rev, I'm probably going to throw you a bit of a curveball and say it isn't the flexibility or the build options of the class, but it's things like the combat chatter, the fact that the legends are representative of some of my favorite parts of the lore, things like the sacrifice of the dwarves or the story of Ronan and Vintari and the birth of the Sylvari. It's the fact that if I take my Rev to the Black Citadel and have Renegade active when I walk up to Kala Scorchrazor's statue, I hear Kala's voice, and I absolutely love the Kala story. So, I've been following another content creator for the last couple of months, and in a bit of a glut of new Let's Plays for Guild Wars 2, his series really stood out as being done by someone with some genuine passion for the content. Not just somebody who saw an unsaturated market and decided to make content for it to increase his sub count. So one of the biggest reasons I've been following his content is the way that he's approaching the game, and it was very much how I did when I first started. running around this world like a complete idiot, enjoying the things that actually make this game special and unique, and interacting with it based on what was often my cringy headcanon for my characters. So, really, Grimdark Half-Off's A Noob Plays Guild Wars 2 series has kind of brought me back to that place where I was endlessly entertained by the Skrit, who are coincidentally totally Skaven, by the way, or just naming my ranger pets or little things like that. Or this tune here, who told me she wanted to be the commander of the pack to live up to the legend forged by her family, and she needed to be a general, and told me it was our goal to grind 400 gold for a commander tag solely for personal RP reasons. So I am linking Grimdark Half-Off's channel in the description down below, and if you are new to his channel, new to Guild Wars 2, or just haven't done so yet, go ahead and hit him up with a like or subscribe. Go watch a few of his videos and remember what it was like when you first fell in love with this game. When you were overwhelmed by all the buttons, had no idea what boon duration was, didn't understand what half the crap in your inventory was, and were consequently more free to enjoy this game for what truly makes it special. So with all that said, I'm going to use all the things that I really love about Rev to put together a build that reflects this character in front of you that I built up in my head, because a big part of MMORPG is the RPG aspect, and after 5 years monogaming Guild Wars 2, part of me lost that. So, Dual Swords, the Glint Legend, Chalice, a bunch of off-meta choices. Let's see if it's enough bounce to solo a desert bounty, shall we? Let's get started. So, basic AoE checks were, for the most part, great, except for these little assholes right here, the Pocket Raptors. It really highlighted maybe one of the biggest weaknesses of the build, and that is the fact that we were running Diviner's gear, and really running into a little bit of a problem with the spike damage. Otherwise, it was just fine. Moving on to open world champions. This is where this build really starts to really kind of hit its groove, so to speak. So what we were handling here is the champion Risen Archmage, which is not an easy open world champion. And this build, of course, just dealt with it just fine. HOT hero points also super smooth. Handled some of the harder ones really without a problem. The birds in Auric Basin being one. Another one being this jerk right here, the pile of guano HP. And again, this gets into the sustain of the build and the ability for it to kind of handle large hits, to turn large hits into healing thanks to the Glint heal. This was a really cool experience. So kicking it up yet another notch, we will go to the Crucible of Consecration, where again, this build came through with flying colors. In terms of the power builds that I've tried to hit up on this one, obviously, you know, I've mentioned it already, the breakbar hate's really strong, but I think it lagged only behind Scrapper in terms of how it handled the Crucible of Consecration, which was really good. And finally, Desert Bounties were absolutely not a problem, and in terms of the power builds that I've put up on the channel, I don't think I've had another power build handle Desert Bounties nearly as well. This handled Desert Bounties better than the Scrapper build that I put up a little while ago. Its sustain is where it needs to be, its breakbar hate is where it needs to be, its ability to deal with the area pressure that sometimes comes with the Desert Bounties was right there. Overall, this was a really fantastic experience, and really was where I fell in love with the build. Seeing a power build being able to handle this kind of thing was absolutely exceptional, and one of the reasons I'm going to recommend this build very highly to you guys. So let's take a look at what I think are the strengths and weaknesses of what I've put together here. The first strength, and I've said it before, I will say it again, power damage. Power damage is absolutely your best friend in open world, particularly if you are doing things like a map complete or you are just derping around in core maps. Power damage is your best, quickest way to deal with things. This build generates a really decent amount of power damage and is really up to just about any task. It's really that simple. And again, I'll just touch on it, you know, in terms of the core experience when we are going through completing Harathi hinterlands or things like that. Condi damage really does lag behind power damage, particularly in the sub 80 experience, so power damage, of course, being the big win here. The number 2 is going to be its sustain. Now, its sustain is going to lag behind a couple of different options. If we are talking about, say, Condi Rev, which is able to supplement the sustain that it gets over and above this build with things like Torment Runes, you're going to see a little bit less sustain in that case. But in terms of power builds and what they bring to the table for sustain, this build is probably near the top in terms of sustain for the power builds that I put up on the channel. It's constantly regenerating health. It's getting a really nice buff off regen. Regen is really quickly available to this build. So sustain, absolutely the number 2 bonus of this build. The number 3 is going to be CC. The Revenant has a couple of really, really strong CC skills. Specifically, we're going to be running the staff on this build. I'll touch on running the staff when I get to the gameplay section. But we're going to be running the staff, and Staff 5 on Revenant is one of the most powerful CC skills in the game. Additionally, we're going to be running Jalus, and the chains on Jalus are a taunt that will absolutely destroy a break bar. So break bar hate on this build, absolutely top notch. Probably one of the best builds that I've ever put up on the channel in terms of break bar hate. So in terms of the weaknesses of this build, or relative weaknesses, so to speak, we are going to start with the fact that it's Rev. And a lot of people shy away from Rev for a number of reasons. And probably the number 1 reason is the legend swapping. It's important to realize that the legend swapping, once you get your head around it, is one of the most powerful things and overpowered things in terms of the class design, because not only does it give us quick access to 2 heals at the tap of a button, it also gives us access to 2 elites at the tap of the button, and all those utility skills. So it really does lead to a slightly more powerful playstyle than I think a lot of people may give it credit for. But I understand the real kind of reason people shy away from Rev is the same reason people shy away from Elementalists with the attunement swap. It's the same reason that people shy away from Engineer and the Engi kits. These can be a real kind of issue for some people. The best way around that is to just kind of get over it, build up the muscle memory. It doesn't take a lot, but it does take getting used to a slightly more complicated playstyle than some builds may offer. So let's keep that in mind. The number 2 weakness of this build is it is a little glassier than a lot of the things I put up on the channel. When it comes to, say, power builds, I will usually favor things like Marauders. This build, however, is not going to be using Marauders. It's going to be using Diviner's gear. Now, Diviner's gear is a little glassier than you may be used to, and I'll go back and touch on the demos earlier. It's the reason the pocket raptors were a bit of a problem on this build, where it may not have been a problem on some of the other ones. So the initial spike damage is going to be something that you may kind of run into some problems with. Leveraging the power of the Revenant and its 2 heals, and probably the most powerful self heal in the game, in the Glint heal, is pretty essential to your performance. And finally, it is a little bit expensive, quote unquote, so to speak. And this gets back to the same thing that I've mentioned a few other times. Stat sets like Diviners, stat sets like in the Condi world, Trailblazers, stat sets like Celestial can be a little bit of a challenge. Now, Diviners itself is gained via the map Thunderhead Peaks, where there are some recipes available, etc. I'm going to say what I usually say at this point, that stat selectable armor boxes are your absolute best friend. That stat selectable trinkets in places like Bitterfrost Frontier, where I am right now, or any of the other kind of options that you have for stat selectable trinkets are going to be your absolute #1 best choice. I don't recommend going ahead and crafting Diviner's gear. The reason being is the acquisition method is no better than Plague Doctors, no better than Celestial. It is one of those sets that does carry with a bit of a premium. That is the strengths and the weaknesses, so to speak. So at this point, let's get into the build and gear section of our entertainment this evening, and we will start with the gear. Now, the gear that I'm running is a mix mostly of Diviners with some Berserkers mixed in. Now, you will see that the trinkets I'm running in Diviners. Now, Diviners, for those of you who may not know, is power, precision, ferocity, and concentration, with the power and concentration majors and the ferocity and precision minors. This is a very glassy kind of high damage set with a lot of concentration. The concentration is a stat that will actually increase our boon duration. Now, the boon duration that we get off this is pretty high, and we'll take a look. In fact, our boon duration right now when we are in Glint is at 95%, with a cap obviously of 100%. So that is really powerful boon duration. It's important to understand that the boon duration that you get off your concentration stat will impact both boons that you provide to yourself and provide to other people. Now, the nature of the Glint legend means we'll be providing a lot of boons to other people. Even you know, when we are not solo, we'll be doing that. So it's important to, you know, kind of maximize the value of that. That makes us kind of the ultimate easy team player, and I'm a really big fan of it. So again, we'll be running some Diviner's gear here. This is mostly Diviners. I have 2 pieces of armor, specifically the gauntlets and the greaves, which are Berserkers. All right, and inside that armor, I am running pack runes. Now, pack runes are another bit of a power bonus with some boon duration, and with the bonus on the 6 of us getting 125 precision, so a lot more critical chance, and it will also grant allies 5 stacks of might, fury, swiftness for 8 seconds while in combat, and that'll refresh every 30 seconds. That's a really, really powerful effect that we get off these runes, and I'm a big fan of them. Inside the weapons, I will be running in the staff. I am running a Diviner staff with a sigil of strength and a sigil of accuracy. I find that the accuracy sigils here are really important. I wouldn't give them up for anything. The strength sigils, you probably heard me talk about before, are a really easy might generator. Over in the swords, I'm running a Berserker sword and 1 Diviner sword. In one sword I'm running a Sigil of Force for the 5% damage bonus, and in the other another Sigil of Accuracy. As you'll see, I'm a big fan of that. Now, options at this point, and there are some. This build works really, really well under most scenarios in a pretty glassy setup. So you want to go with Marauders on this. You wouldn't be wrong. It wouldn't be awful. You'd lose a little bit of DPS. You'd lose a lot of boon duration. But Marauders might be a really excellent choice here. If you're one of those players that doesn't struggle, hits your dodges all the time, and is pretty advanced, you know, going with a mix of Berserkers and Assassin's gear for the full DPS would not be wrong either. But you have those options. In terms of rune options, I didn't really find anything that worked as well as the pack runes, so I would kind of recommend sticking with those. But in the weapons, you know, any kind of mix of strength, accuracy, force sigils, maybe an impact sigil, things like that are really powerful. This build also does a fair bit of interrupt, so going with severance sigils isn't a bad idea. You know, those are really cheap on the TP as well. But that is how I have set up the gear on this tune. So let's go over here into the build at this point. In our build, we are going to be running Devastation, Invocation, and Herald. Under Devastation, we are going to be running Unsuspecting strikes deal increased strike damage to foes within with health above the health threshold. So this means any enemy above 80% health will take an additional 20% damage. That is, you know, if you've been watching my videos, I've been pretty clear about it. Any kind of percentage damage modifier is obviously a pretty big value. The other ones here are not really great, but you could use Battle Scarred on this one and get away with it. It wouldn't be awful. All right. We were going to be running Thrill of Combat, gain stacks of battle scars while in combat. This is going to be where most of our passive sustain is coming from. This build has really great passive sustain, and it really comes from this and from the Grandmaster in this. So these are absolutely non-negotiable. Dance of Death, applying vulnerability to foes grants stacks of battle scars. The healing from battle scars is increased while you are below the health threshold. Again, this is a massive increase to our survivability. This build does absolutely generate some really good vulnerability, which will give us that passive sustain we're looking for. Over in Invocation, we're going to be running Rising Tide. While your health is above the threshold, strike damage is increased. Again, another percentage damage modifier, and this one being 7%, while our health is above 90%. It's basically our very own Scholar Rune built into the traits. We're going to be running Incensed Response. Incensed Response means that we will gain might when we grant ourselves fury. We will be giving ourselves a fair bit of fury. Getting might from that obviously is a really nice bonus. This will be part of the way that we're going to be maxing our might at all times. Finally, we're going to be running Rolling Mists. Critical hit chance has increased effectiveness while you are under the effect of fury. So what this does is increases the value of fury for our critical chance. Obviously, the more we crit, the more damage we do. So it's really just set up that way to keep our damage nice and high. And it's really one of the reasons that, in terms of the open world experience, this power build really is competitive with some of the other ones when it comes to dealing damage. Going under Herald here at this point, we're going to be running Elder's Respite, which is regeneration heals for more, gain regeneration when struck below the health threshold. We also get regeneration from the Glint Heal, okay, so when we toggle that on, we're getting regen at that point, and that's just another buff to our passive sustain. Going under Hardening Persistence, strike damage taken is reduced for every point of upkeep that is currently in use. Shield skills remove conditions. We're not going to be running the shield, but Hardening Persistence is absolutely a nice way of giving ourselves a little bit more sustain. Shining Aspects is not really of great value. Shared Empowerment, well, applying a boon to an ally, also apply might to nearby allies. If I'm running in group scenarios, I'm absolutely going to go ahead and just kind of switch over to this one. Finally, we're going to be running Forceful Persistence. Deal increased strike damage with active upkeep skills. So the more upkeep skills that we have going on, and when we are running in Herald, we are always going to be having at least 3 on. We'll go over that in the combat section. This will be generating a fair bit of a damage increase for us. And specifically speaking, if we are running 3 of our upkeep skills at all times, or trying to keep those up as often as possible, that's a 12% damage increase. So you see all those damaging modifiers that we put together on this are really going to put us into that place where we're doing those nice, hard, quick hits. And that is our build. So without that said, hey, let's take a look at the fashion. So fashion on this tune is my usual collection of interesting things we can find in game and gem store items. So let's get into it here at this point. I do use the Raven Helm, and I was really lucky to get that out of one of my Blackline key runs. I really enjoy that. Don't often keep it on, but it is a really incredible piece, so I really like that. We're going to be using the Barbaric Pauldrons. The Barbaric Pauldrons, the shoulder piece there, is a really easy to find core piece. I believe you'll get that in heavy armor around the 50-60 kind of zone there, and again, really easy to pick up. We're going to be running the Primeval Warplate. The Primeval Warplate is found in the gem store. As I want to say, you know, those gem store armor sets do show up in the Black Lion statuette vendor from time to time, so I would definitely do your weekly key run, build up your little collection of Black Lion statuettes, and then when those show up in the gem store, definitely pick up those things. They are very, very high value sets. Going to be using the Phalanx gauntlets. The Phalanx gauntlets, also another gem store set, and just like the other one, available anytime we like, or rather anytime when they cycle into the gem store. Well, hello, person on the rabbit. How are you doing? Great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. We're going to be running the Primeval leg plates. The Primeval leg plates, again, part of the same set as the top. And we're going to be running the Triumphant Heroes Greaves, the Triumphant armor set found in World vs. World. Absolutely high value set in terms of the way it works with other pieces. I'm a really big fan of that, and really all you got to do is some World vs. World, start building up those skins. The Triumphant Heroes set is the second level of those skins, and something you're going to want to do if you're going to want to get into the legendary armor from World vs. World, so you might want to take a look at that as well. In terms of the weapons, I'm running the Light Ward Battle Staff. The Light Ward Battle Staff is probably one of the nicest staff skins in the game, and this is found very, very rarely in Verdant Brink, coming out of the large airship crates. I was really, really lucky to have not one but two of these drop. It was one of the first things that actually dropped for me in this game that was worth a significant amount of gold. At the time, it was worth 300 gold, I believe, and I'd never seen money like that. But of course, me being the kind of player I am, I found it. And I was lucky, though. About a month later, I found another one and got the money from that. You can actually get these off the TP at this point. There is one event, and then it escapes me at this point. Oh, right, it's Dragon Bash, where these actually drop a little bit more often. So if you're wanting to get one of these, you know, going around Dragon Bash is probably about the time when the price drops about 2/3 on that weapon. But that is that. In terms of the swords, I'm going to be running Vengeance. Vengeance is the precursor for the Shining Blade. And I'm going to be honest with you, why don't I use Shining Blade on this character when I obviously have the precursors? And the reason is that I'm running a Norn, and my headcanon will not allow me to run Shining Blade on a Norn. And I realize how ridiculous that sounds, but that's just the way I roll. So let's take a few moments now, head on over to the raid lobby and see how this all comes together. So let's get into the gameplay here on this one. It's not terribly complicated, but being that it is Rev, we do want to go over a few more options than normal and such. But the first thing I am going to touch on is the fact that yes, I am using staff. And yes, I understand that the staff is a healing slash support slash utility weapon. That said, I think we get a lot of staff that justifies its use in this build. Don't pop down into the comments and say, hey, WTF are you running the staff? You know what? I'm running the staff because I like the staff. It's that simple. It's not going to be our primary source of damage, but I think it's important to kind of recognize that the staff's damage on its own is actually good on the auto attack, and it brings us some extra value. So before we actually get into anything else, I just wanted to touch on that. I'm aware that, you know, if I was traded differently and if I was running different armor, etc., the staff would be a really good healing weapon. That said, the staff actually carries a few benefits on its own. We're not going to be doing the majority of our damage in staff, but we are going to get some really, really serious value off the weapon that actually justifies its use. So let's kind of pop into that right now and look at the staff. The staff on Rev is largely defined by the power of its auto attack. And if we take a look at the auto attack, that's a really strong auto attack, particularly if we are letting its letting its auto attack chain kind of go through to the third strike. And really, I'm a fan of it. It's got massive cleave. It's going to hit a number of enemies at once. It's an absolutely beautiful thing. While I keep talking here, I'm just going to go and turn the pulsing damage off for a few moments while we go over some of the other options on it. The 2 on the staff is not something that I would absolutely be using on a regular basis, and may not even justify the energy usage on that, so I'd probably kind of avoid using the 2. The 3 on staff is a block. So the block... That's kind of one of those things that, you know, if you get the timing on a block and you've got that weapon up, it's a really powerful thing, you know. Negating incoming damage with a block is absolutely huge, and not every class gets access to them. So keep that in mind. The block, absolutely high value. The 4 is... really not great on this build specifically. If you're running a heal build, the 4 is absolutely fantastic. Now the heal build, the 4 is a Condi cleanse, and in those rare instances in open world that you are needing a Condi cleanse, you've got one on the 4. It's available right there and easy to use, but I would not rely on it for a heal, because untraded and without healing gear on, that's only actually healing you for 1295 of your hit points, and that's not a huge, what I would call huge value, so I would kind of steer away from using the 4. The 5, however, is breakbar hate, and some of the best breakbar hate in the game, and we will get back to that when we get into the breakbar section. So keep that in mind. I'm aware of the perception of the staff as a healing weapon. I'm aware that it is a really good healing weapon, but as a utility weapon, as a secondary weapon, I actually think it's a really strong choice on power rev, and it's certainly better than the hammer for PvE. The hammer, you know, being situationally acceptable maybe in world versus world. I don't know, your mileage may vary on the hammer. I'm not a fan of the hammer at all on rev. It's just not my jam. So that's kind of where I stand on this in terms of power weapons until we get Vindicator, you know, and the Great Sword. I think that obviously your number 1 choice on Rev is going to be the swords and the offhand sword as well, and I think the number 2 choice is the staff. I really do, and I'll just leave it at that point. We also, again, are running the swords, as I mentioned. The swords are some really just beautiful damage. If we start auto-attacking here, we see that the vulnerability really starts to stack up quickly. And as I mentioned earlier, the vulnerability is generation is actually going to give us some of our sustain. So, making sure we're hitting our auto attacks, obviously. The 2, also nice damage, does some chill. The chill is going to give us a little bit of soft CC. Alright, so that's available there. The 3 is one of my favorite powers in the game. And really, it's a distance attack that'll actually teleport us in a la Nightcrawler of the X-Men and do a few quick hits. Really strong skill. Also going to generate us a little bit of might, and it's a 2.5 evade, and keeping that in mind under those situations where you may have blown a dodge and you need a little bit of evade, we've got it right there. And I really love that skill. Shackling Wave on the 4 is really powerful stuff. In addition to being very big damage, it's also going to dump down 8 stacks of vuln, which again helps us with our sustain, and do a mobilize. And a mobilize obviously is going to be nice breakbar hate against anything with a breakbar, so let's hit that right there. That is a really nice attack, and I'm a big fan. I'll just refresh that for your benefit. Hit that again. That is a really beautiful skill. On the 5, Death Strike, okay, this is going to give us a whole bunch of Fury in addition to everything else, and when you saw the way the build was put together, Fury is obviously of big value to us, and it's a Shadow Step, so we can just teleport in. So really, when I'm in combat on this character, what I'm going to be doing primarily in terms of my weapon skills, and I'll just I'll just put that back up, is I'm going to go ahead and from a distance probably hit the 5, come in, build up that vulnerability really quickly, and start attacking. And really, it's not rocket science, and you know, hitting your powers off cooldown is not going to kill you on this, particularly at this point. Now, going over and mixing our utilities into it, and of course, since it's Revenant, you know, we don't get a whole lot of choices for our utilities. That comes with the benefit of being able to swap to them at any given point. When I'm in Glint, I want to make sure, okay, that I'm running the first 3 here at all times. This is going to be generating me might, this is going to be keeping my fury uptime, and this is going to be generating me regen. And if you recall the way that our build was put together, keeping up upkeep skills is absolutely going to give us a damage boost. So now we see that that's a pretty significant boost in our damage. And we got that going on right there. So keeping that in mind, so you know, your easy mode version of this is to camp the sword and make sure that these 3 facets are on. Now once these 3 facets are on, obviously we have the ability to flip them over, because the way that these facets work is they are toggles, but as we untoggle them we get an additional power from them. So in here we're going to get a whole bunch of heal. Now the glint heal is really one of the most busted skills in the game, and what happens here is if I actually click on this at this point and activate the toggle, what is going to happen is that all my incoming damage will be turned to healing. I cannot express to you, if you have never used this, and there are 1 or 2 other skills very much like it on other classes, how overpowered that can absolutely be. So definitely going to recommend you kind of get used to using that. So definitely Infuse Light, you know, when it comes to getting ready to take those hits, or when I find myself in real need of some really big heals, I'm going to click that and jump into problems, and I'll demonstrate a little bit of the sustain here in a few moments. Other things to recognize here is the toggle on this one. A Gaze of Darkness is 10 seconds of vulnerability, or sorry, 10 stacks of vulnerability, and again, that is just going to straight up help us with our sustain, as mentioned earlier. And as you can see, we can build a whole lot of vulnerability on our targets really quickly on this build. Also keeping in mind that when we do bring this back up, okay, this is also our stun break. I've said it before, I will say it again, Rev is not in a great place for stun breaks. I actually found that Vindicator did offer a little bit of solutions in terms of this, but again, keeping in mind this is our main stun break right here. Going over to Facet of Elements, you know, the Elemental Blast is the only reason we're going to run this. The toggle, okay, on this, and if I fire this off, that's just a fire that's going to go down there and damage, and I suppose I absolutely could have just fired it off on the golem itself. It's some nice damage. Also a little bit of break bar hate because it's doing a fair bit of chill. But really what we're talking about here is that it is swiftness. Now, this swiftness, the moment we toggle this on, is huge, and we can just toggle it off with impunity at this point by doing the damage. The only time I'm actually going to leave this facet up is when I'm in situations where I am, say, doing escorts or things like DRMs and stuff like that, when I need to kind of speed up NPCs. Pulsing that swiftness around to 10 targets is absolutely huge value. Finally, let's go over here into Facet of Chaos. Facet of Chaos is absolutely going to be generating us some protection. Now, protection, if you are unaware, is minus 33% strike damage specifically. That's a huge benefit, but as you see, this runs our power down pretty quickly. Where I'm mostly going to use this is for a little bit more break bar hate and for some super speed on the people around me, so I'm not going to keep this up very often just because of the way that that's killing my energy. But if I click it, we got some break bar hate, okay, and some super speed on the people around us, no problem with that. But I'm not going to be using this. I'm just really, you know, going easy mode. I'm going to make sure that these first 3 toggles are up, and then I'm just going to worry about, you know, me DPS. going over onto Jealous, and again, you know, this is very much like the staff. I recognize that if I wanted to do DPS, I would be running Shiro. I run the Glint, and I'll go back to the intro on this. I'll run Jealous because I like the story of the dwarves, and I'm not even gonna front. But that said, you know, this isn't a valueless kind of scenario. So let's go over a few things. We got a serviceable heal on Soothing Stone. Really, not too much to say about that. We have massive breakbar hate on Forced Engagement, and we'll go over that in the breakbar. But absolutely huge breakbar hate. But where we're going to really get value off Jealous, in addition to those things, is via Vengeful Hammers, which are pretty good DPS actually, and they're also really going to impact a number of creatures around. So it's one of those things where you need to clear out area things like dealing with the pocket raptors. You're going to pull out those hammers pretty quickly, and you know, we're also going to get some stab out lightning fields off the roads, so inspiring reinforcements, which I really like. So that is really all going to come together to start doing some damage, and that's really kind of the way I'm going to kind of put that all together. Rite of the Great Dwarf, and I love this power just for the name and the concept alone. Rite of the Great Dwarf is going to give us 5 seconds of damage reduction of 50%. So what that means is if I can stack this on top of protection, I'm really doing a huge benefit, and not just to myself, okay, but to the people around me. That said, it says it's a stun break, but it's also a channel. It's not really an effective stun break, so keep that in mind. But again, you know, Rite of the Great Dwarf also turns you to stone, just in case you like ELO. And really, that's kind of the way it goes. I really like Rite of the Great Dwarf, just to when you're in those situations where you or the people around you may have caught a little bit too much aggro. Rite of the Great Dwarf has a way of kind of turning that around. But again, the main reason I'm going to use this is for the CC off the Forced Engagement, and for the damage from Vengeful Hammers, and a little bit of pulsing stability off Inspiring Reinforcement. So, with all that said, let's take a couple of seconds and take a quick look here at our sustained, and then we'll get into the breakbar hate portion of it. But I'm going to set ourselves for the mildly threatening. We'll start taking some damage here, and we'll see the way this all comes together. So obviously, as I'm attacking, I'm building up vulnerability. The more vulnerability I generate, the better my sustain. And again, I'm getting a nice big stack of them off that. So you see these little bits of these little packets actually add up pretty quickly. Now if I go over here, all right, put myself in Glint, activate this facet, you can see that's a pretty significant amount of self-sustain without really any kind of pressure. Then if I want, I can put the protection on, generate that. Or I can very quickly flip over here, and I'm looking at a very small amount of damage incoming at that point. And really, I'm not doing anything but just, you know, clicking a couple of powers and hitting my attacks. So keep that in mind. A lot of your sustain is just going to be coming from generating vulnerability. The sword's going to generate it naturally. You're also going to get a really nice bit off Shackling Wave there, and that really is kind of the way that works. So we'll flip back over, put that down, and you can see this is all kind of coming back. And there you see with the Glint heal, again, all incoming damage for a couple of seconds is actually going to heal us instead of damaging us. And really, it's that simple. So what I'm actually going to do here at this point is I'm going to remove the Golem, and then I'm going to respawn him just so we can do a little bit of a breakbar demo. Take the pulsing damage off for a few moments. And let's take a look at this. So I've been through a few of the options here at this point. The first being we're going to get some blindness and some vulnerability if we click on this, which is decent. But we're also going to get most of our breakbar hate from Glint off the knockback from Facet of Chaos. So that is a really big part of our breakbar hate. All right. going to be getting a little bit of soft CC off these other skills, and you'll see that coming down really quickly. But when it's time to really smoke the break bar on this one, your big hits are swapping over into staff, hitting the staff 5. And you can see that is almost, that is just huge right there. It does have the negative part about taking us out of position a little bit. You know what? Live with it. Love it. It's an amazing skill. We'll wait a couple of seconds here for it to come back, and we will go over the other options here. But wrecking a break bar on this tune is absolutely easier than just about any other tune, because again, some of this is happening naturally, but the rest is going to be happening actively. So if I go ahead and I throw down the chains here with forced engagement, we can take a really good look at the way that starts to come down really quick via the taunt, and that's massive. If we follow that up with the 5, that's the break bar right there in 2 moves. That, I mean, I can't express to you the quality of life that generates, keeping that in mind. So again, a lot of the other powers are going to generate, a little bit of soft CC on their own, or little bits of CC that we just, don't have to quite worry about. But in the overall scheme of things, when it comes down to really taking out a break bar, our 3 big wins are going to be starting, in Glint. All right, and we'll just wait until we can flip over really quickly here. So we'll start in Glint. We'll hit our Facet of Chaos there. All right, we'll do our staff, and then we'll hit our chains, and that's the dead break bar right there in 3 moves. Big fan of that one. Very big fan of that combo for break bar hate, and it's a really big part of what you're going to bring to any prospective group or any prospective kind of engagement where break bar hate is important. So things, of course, like the Lake Dork Jade cannons, things like that are going to be cake, so to speak. And that is where we will leave it. And that, my friends, is my Power Rev build. I'm really super happy with it. Didn't take me much to put together. I kind of had everything sitting around already. But again, if you're looking at putting this kind of thing together and you want the Diviner's gear, obviously I'll just touch base on that again, get into the stat selectable options that you have available to you, and all that will become a whole lot easier. And that's kind of it, everyone. A little bit of a break on the videos here for the next week or 2 as I effect my move across the country. So just advance warning on that without getting too deeply into it. This will be the last video for a few days at least. And that really is it. I am going to thank you all very much for watching. Those of you who made it through the entire video to this point and stuck with it. And I hope you took something from it. I'm going to remind you all to have fun in game and min-max your real life, and we'll see you again in the mists.